Hi, and welcome back to the Inappropriate Harry Potter podcast. Happy New Year to everyone that's listening. We hope you had a really good break. My name's Christina.
And I'm Natalie, and today we're looking at Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Chapter 5, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. That was a bit of a tongue twister for me. Do you think that J.K. Rowling did that on purpose to keep us on our toes?
Yep, she absolutely loves alliteration, doesn't she?
Oh, you
Can't
hate it,
get
don't
enough of
you?
it.
Are you being
It's
sarcastic?
better than Shrieking Shack, which I just couldn't say properly the whole time we were doing Prisoner of Azkaban, to be fair.
Mm, yeah, I'm glad that that's over. Weeping Willow's okay to say, but Shrieking Shack is hard.
Yes, so chapter 5, just moving on.
That went down like a lead balloon.
um, chapter 5 sees we've just left the Uncle Vernon's home. And the last thing we see is basically Fred and George leaving those suites behind. And the
Mm.
opening of this chapter is everyone's laughing at that joke. And Dudley has a massive tongue now because it's like one of those tongue growing sweets. Do you know what they're called? I can't remember what they're called.
It's like a tongue toffee, isn't it?
Tongue-tied toffee, yeah. Um,
Mm.
I just thought, Jesus, like, is that funny? Like, if someone's tongue swelled up to like 14 foot long, they're probably choking, they're probably terrified, probably think they're gonna die.
Well, yeah, and actually, maybe Dudders does die. And J.K. Rowling put that in the book, and that would teach them, wouldn't it? Not to be
That
bullies.
would have been the perfect alliterative title for this chapter. Dudders does die.
Dudley. And also, would it really have made a big difference with the rest of the books if he did die?
No, no, actually.
Harsh but true.
Yeah,
And actually, at least the lesson there would have been don't give people that you don't know sweets because, allergic reactions, swallow your own tongue, those sort of things do happen to people. So that could have killed him. You're right.
it's horrendous. It's really scary. I didn't think it was appropriate. And so Mr. Weasley is annoyed. So he comes after them a few minutes later. He comes into the room, and he's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did that. I devoted my career to preventing the mistreatment of Muggles, and you've just undone all that." He's got a 4 foot long tongue. He was terrified. And I was like, okay, so
Mm.
what's going to be the punishment? Are they going to be grounded? Are they going to be punished in some way? Are
Are
they
they
going to
going to
have
be force? Are they going to be force fed two of those sweets so that they know what it feels like?
exactly like I was like waiting for Mr. Weasley to be like, yeah, this is unacceptable what you've done. And there is no punishment. When Mrs. Weasley does come in, he's like, don't worry, dear, I've spoken to them. And I was like, wow, that's it. No wonder Fred and George are out of control. There's no outcome or what's the word? There's no like
Re-
repercussions for any of their behavior.
Yeah. Do you remember that TV show, Super Nanny, that was on? And they would bring in this like dominatrix, Mary Poppins style woman who would
Hmm.
just teach the parents how to parent their children. I think they need something like this because they are like a bit of a walkover, aren't they? Mr. Weasley's always been like that though.
Yeah, it's not good at all.
No, he's such a cream puff. Like he really needs to be more assertive and just be like, no, that's unacceptable. But
Yeah,
what kind of
here's your
punishment
wands. I'm going to snap them in half. That's it.
or what I'm trying to think what else would have been a really good punishment for them.
Like,
Not
go on.
maybe not going to the Quidditch championship thing.
Quidditch World Cup.
Yeah.
That is pretty harsh because they've looked forward to that for like years, isn't it? Only like every 4 years.
Is it harsh or is it not harsh enough? They could have killed Dudley.
I think lock up their broomsticks in a cupboard so they can't like play their little Quidditch matches in the garden, which they like doing. And I would take their wands off them. I don't know, give them horrible jobs around the house.
You're right. It just feels like everyone's like, oh, you guys are so cheeky, naughty, tut, tut, tut. But it does make me feel like Mr. Weasley should lose his job because if he can't even control his own sons from the mistreatment of muggles, then that's not a good sign, is it?
No, really not cool. And I'm pretty sure they would have broken a law because they did magic. Okay, I know it's not they doing magic with a wand, but they still did something that's involving magic in front of muggles. So,
How old do you have to be though for that to be? Is it?
well, you're not supposed to ever do magic in front of muggles, are you?
Oh yeah, but you're right. But you can't do magic outside of Hogwarts either, can you? And that
No.
should count as magic.
I was thinking this the other day because I was listening to Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and Hermione says something like, "Oh, I've tried a few spells um, before she went to Hogwarts," and I was like, "Whoa, that's against the rules."
Expulsion.
Yeah, and also
Expulsion.
on the train, Ron is doing the rat spell to turn the rat yellow, and I think he says he's done that at home, and I was like, "Wow, again, isn't that against the rules?"
Yeah, it seems like one rule for one and one rule for others. Bit inconsistent there. But you're
Mm.
definitely right. Fred and George definitely need more punishment than just like, oh, everyone laughing at how funny they are.
What I really liked about this chapter, and I got quite excited because I don't really remember this from reading it before, we finally meet Bill and Charlie, and they're quite
Hmm.
different the way they're described. So, who do you think sounds hotter, Bill or Charlie?
Oh, I was going to ask you this as well. So just recap. Charlie worked with dragons in Romania. He was built like the twins, so shorter and stockier than Percy and Ron. So I kind of like short and stocky. Um, and he had a broad, good-natured face, which was weather-beaten and so freckly that he looked almost tanned. His arms were muscular, and one of them had
Hello.
a large, shiny burn on it. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's
It is a
obviously Charlie.
no-brainer, but I thought maybe you'd
Um,
be like a bit random, be like, "Oh, Bill."
I see. When I think of Bill, yeah. So Bill, I guess it doesn't seem. It just says that he had been head boy, so a bit of a boff, and he is cool. He's
But
tall with long dark hair that he tied back in a ponytail, an earring which was like a fang dangling from it, and he looked like he belonged in a rock concert. I'm warming to Bill.
do you know what I find ridiculously hypocritical about the way Bill was described, which really stands out to me?
Mhm.
He has dragon hide boots. So he's supposed to be a lover of dragons. He loves those animals. He loves breeding them like Hagrid does. But at some point, there's been a dead dragon, whether and they've skinned it and made boots out of it. And I just think that doesn't make any sense.
Oh my word, Chris, that's awful.
Yeah, it's like
That's like
someone
someone
wearing
owning,
fur.
yeah, or someone owning a cow sanctuary and wearing leather boots.
Yeah, exactly.
Or someone working in a zoo and wearing like a zebra jacket and lion skin hat. And you get the idea.
Yeah.
And a
Um,
giraffe scarf.
I just thought that was odd. But yeah, I did
So,
like the sound. Charlie has calluses and rough hands, and I was like, yeah,
so out
that
of all of
sounds nice.
that, the muscles and all that other hot stuff, it's the calloused hands that did it for
I
you.
just like it. I don't know why. It's like, men that work with their hands, they're all rough.
Yeah.
Something about
You know
that.
who else works with his hands?
Who? Hagrid.
Hagrid.
Yeah, now the more I'm thinking about it, Hagrid's got big old rough hands full of calluses.
Stocky, well
Yep.
built.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we going to decide who gets Charlie?
Mm. Yeah, I'm not too fussed on Paul. Oh no, sorry, Charlie, right. You can have Bill.
Oh, I don't want Bill.
Snooze you lose. Anyway, so we've always talked about Mrs. Weasley being angry. Like she again doesn't really know what's going on. Like she's just turned up after they've just talked about it. And I think Mr. Weasley's more scared of Molly because as soon as
Mm.
she's like, "Oh, what's been going on?" He's like, "Nothing, nothing, dear. I've spoken to them." And I'm like, "So you're going to let Fred and George get off purely because you're too scared of your own wife?"
Yeah, I don't understand that. Is he worried that she will punish them in his eyes too severely, or is he worried that she will shout at him because he doesn't command any respect? Like, is this feeding into an ongoing marriage relationship problem that they've got? Maybe they're having kind of like counseling for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just feel like he cannot be asked with her just going off on one and losing it and having to calm her down. So he's just like trying to smooth everything over.
Or maybe he's worried that she will make a bigger deal out of it than he is, and it will make him look incompetent or impotent
I
or whatever the
suppose so,
word
because at
is.
the end of the day, they were under his responsibility. He chose to take them to a muggle home, which I think was a big mistake. He shouldn't have done that.
Mm.
Um, they were acting out of control. So I suppose technically it is partly his fault as a responsible adult.
Yeah, maybe is he scared of Molly?
Yeah, 100%.
God, I
I
wonder
think
how
so.
that. She's almost mummies him, doesn't she?
Mm,
Like maybe she undermines him and makes him feel less like a man in his eyes. Like
maybe.
the idea of like I'm the man of the house. I command authority and respect. That belief system. Maybe she undermines him and makes him feel a little bit redundant, but he kind of is like in so
I,
much as he doesn't parent the kids at all. Like when do we ever see him parenting properly?
we don't. But you're right though, because I remember in the Chamber of Secrets, he talks about how he's investigating the Malfoys, or he's going to take on the Malfoys or something. And she's like, "Oh, be careful, Arthur dear." And he's like, "Oh, what? You don't think I'm up to it?" kind of thing. And we were like, "Ooh, Arthur, someone's feeling a little bit insecure."
Yeah, absolutely. Because she is the matriarch, isn't she?
Yeah, and like, I guess he's got all that insecurity because he hasn't been promoted. He doesn't make much money. His family don't have money. There's all that going on as well, isn't there?
Yeah. So we just
So
analysed their marriage and their relationship, haven't we, to death?
we have. So Ginny is there and she just does that typical thing where she just turns scarlet and staring at Harry.
Be
Um,
cool, dude. Be
I know,
cool.
that's what I was thinking. Like, he did rescue her as well. They shared that moment in the Chamber of Secrets. But I think J.K. Rowling made it quite clear because I was thinking, oh, is Ginny only in love with Harry because he rescued her? Like she's got, that syndrome where you fall in love with your rescuer or whatever. But J.K.
Mm,
Rowling put in this chapter, Ginny had had a thing for Harry ever since his first visit to the Burrow. So I think that was her
mm.
way of just clarifying this is nothing to do with that. There's always been something there.
Yeah.
And what's really cool about this chapter as well is it's the introduction to the whole joke shop stuff that Fred and George have just started. So they've just started, um, with their little supplier order forms, and it says that Molly finds them and burns them all. And they're starting to build up the very, very beginning of their little joke suite empire, which I quite liked.
Hang on, what? Molly finds those price lists and then she burns them all.
Yeah, Ron's telling Harry what's happened. He's like, "Oh yeah, Mum found a list of their order forms, and she got really mad and burnt them."
I don't remember that. Are you sure she burnt them?
Hmm.
Because that is awful.
She's worried, and I used to find Molly really annoying, but now I was reading this chapter and I just thought, actually, I kind of understand because she's really worried. Like, first of all, she was like, "Oh, Fred and George have got no ambition," and I was like, "Hang on, they have loads of ambition. Like, they're entrepreneurs." But she was saying what she's worried about is that the improper use of magic office department or whatever will they'll get in trouble because they're obviously using
Yeah.
magic to make all sorts of things that maybe. So now
But
I
isn't
see
that
her
what?
more as like a worried mother, worried about their future, worried about them getting in trouble, than I do of her just judging that they're not doing, really well academically instead.
Well, I also agreed with you when she made that comment around how they don't have any ambition. I was like, hang on a second. They are entrepreneurs. They're coming up with their own business. They're doing order forms and researching and probably trialing out a lot of these sweets on themselves. Like that is really ambitious. But you're right, isn't it? She's fearful that they're going to get into trouble. But Yonkos. I mean, don't they use magic in some of their sweets? I mean, isn't it like a love potion smell? Like, aren't there potion-based sweets that you can buy that we become introduced to in the later books?
Can't remember what products Yonkos have or whether we're even told. Is it Zonko? Sorry, I don't really remember, but I do think what Fred and George are doing are just outstripping anything that's out there at the moment. Like I think it's really good magic and it's quite advanced. Like she should be. I think wouldn't you be proud and be like, this is
Yeah.
incredible what you're doing? But I guess she wants them to take those skills and channel them into like a more of a professional or like respectable way.
But that's quite a respectable thing to do, isn't it? To start up your own business, make loads of money,
But she just sees it as
invent.
silly, doesn't she? And also
It's a
dangerous.
shame.
She's worried that they'll get in trouble because it's improper use of magic. Like if you're causing harm as well. So even Hermione says it's like they're creating sweets and stuff and jokes that could be harmful to people. Like they're causing nosebleeds and causing people to faint. And there is that
That's
worry.
true.
Mm.
That is true. And actually, isn't it in book 5 or book 6 when doesn't Draco Malfoy use one of the sweets against them?
Oh, it's not a
Oh,
sweet. It's Peruvian dark. Isn't it not Peruvian darkness powder? Instant darkness
um,
powder.
is that what they came up with, the boys, the
Yeah, Fred
twins?
and George, I'm sure. And then, yeah, you're right. Draco Malfoy does use it in like the later books to do something naughty.
Because it is a form, I suppose, of dark magic, isn't it? Some of the, well, maybe not dark magic, but it could be used for dark magic purposes. So they're kind of right. Although some of it gets used for good as well.
I guess it's like what we were saying earlier, like the tongue-tied toffees. At what point, you know how like you can have a practical joke and then there's a
Mm,
fine line between practical jokes and being funny, and actually taking practical jokes too far is quite easily done, isn't it? And it becomes like
yeah,
actually this is more like bullying. And it's that
yeah,
fine line. And I think you're right with the sense of dark magic. It's a fine
yeah.
line between these joke products that are just a laugh and then actually no, they can be used for more sinister purposes, which does actually happen. That's an interesting idea.
And then what if someone dies because someone uses that Peruvian midnight dust stuff and they fall down the stairs and break their neck and die? I mean, sorry
Yeah,
to be morbid. I know this is the second time I've discussed death, but would that be manslaughter? Would they go to Azkaban?
maybe that's what she's worried about. And I totally get that. I think that's what I would worry about personally. Like I'm always thinking of the worst case scenario.
I mean, now I'm wondering if our listeners, what would you do if you bought some of these sweets from a joke shop? Imagine that you are a wizard. You tried it out on your friends and they died. They maybe, something awful happened as a result. Would you want revenge on the twins? Would it be their fault?
I can see this being like a spin-off. I know I always say this every episode, like this could be a spin-off. But
Yeah,
it
like
could
the
be
the people. Yeah, what's their shop called later on?
Weasley's Wizards Wheezes, is it?
That could be the name of the series, and it talks about all the people whose lives are affected by the products
Oh
they
my
buy.
God, like yeah, really dark. Well,
Yeah.
as Molly is stressing about this and saying she's worried about them and they've got no ambition, she's trying to cook dinner and everything's going wrong. And then she goes to pick up her wand to finish cooking, and it's one of their fake wands and it turns into something like a canary or whatever. I just thought that
Mm.
was perfect timing.
Yeah.
She's literally about to lose her shit. She goes to grab her wand. She's like, for God's sake, Fred and George.
Oh, she's patient in some ways because this has got to be relentless, hasn't it?
Yeah, I'd, I,
There
I'd find it
was
funny, but I guess if you lived
it
with it,
is
maybe it wouldn't be
funny.
funny.
Maybe those of us who don't have children find it funny, but those of us who do have children are like, this really resonates with me, and I'm going to lose my shit because
Possibly.
they feel like they know what it's like to try and get a message across and just be like ignored. But
Mm,
before that happens, don't they go up to the bedroom? Doesn't Ron go up to the
yes.
bedroom? Is that before or after the
Yeah, it's
scene where they're
before.
talking?
We skipped a bit because we went somewhere. So just before going up to the bedroom as well, Percy, the pompous Percy, has begun. So
Mm,
he starts going, I've got work to do. And Harry's really polite. And he's like, oh, what work have you got to do, Percy? And I was like, fair play, Harry. Like, Harry's very polite and kind. Like, he wouldn't start ripping into Percy or even ignoring him. And
yeah.
Percy's like, oh, I'm writing a report on standardizing cauldron thickness to do you know that there's 3% leaks a year because cauldrons are too thin? I'm just like, Jesus Christ, like this
Get
is
a
so
girlfriend
boring.
or boyfriend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Fred and George are really ripping into Percy, and again, it's that borderline of where is it funny and where is it just bullying? And I'm starting to think now, actually, the way Fred and George treat Percy, like, yeah, he's pompous and he's annoying, but they are constantly bullying him.
Yeah, that can't be good for him.
But at the
But
same
then it
time,
gets funny. It's a little bit funny, like
yeah,
at the end of the chapter, they're like, "Oh, what if someone posts dinosaur dung into your letterbox?" And this guy and Percy's like, "Oh, it was from Norway and it was a soil sample. It was nothing personal." And they were like, "Yeah, it was personal. We sent it." And I was like, "Tee hee."
yeah, that was funny. I feel like J.K. Rowling's using Percy as a little bit of a comic character in this chapter, that there's quite a few interactions between him and Fred and George, where it is funny. Percy's really unaware that he's really boring. Um,
But do
yeah,
you
and then
think this foreshadows a little bit the split in the family, where it's like Percy and the Ministry versus his family?
yeah, this is where it starts, definitely. This is where it represents Percy as the black sheep. He doesn't fit in. And I do feel bad for him. Like, he's still polite. Like, yeah, he's pompous and he's annoying, but he's not rude.
No.
Let him be himself. He's just trying to be himself. And that, okay, he's not very self-aware, but I don't think there's any reason to be constantly bullying him all the time. And I think that's why he does move
No.
out. Um, there
Yeah,
is a
and also he probably feels really ostracized. And when he works at the Ministry for the first time in his life, he probably feels like he's got a place.
Exactly. And there's this funny bit which I wrote down because I thought was quite amusing. They're having dinner, um, and he's hinting. So he's like, right, I'm so busy having to sort out this Quidditch World Cup, and of course we've got another event that we need to organize straight afterwards. And he's obviously talking about the Goblet of Fire. Um, and the Triwizard Tournament, but he's trying to keep it secret. And Ron's like, oh my God, he's been going on about this secret event the whole summer. It's probably an exhibition on thick bottom cauldrons. And I was like, fair play, Ron. That was actually quite
But
funny.
yeah. That was quite funny. How do you feel Mr. Weasley feels that his son is working on all these potentially important projects and he's still working out how to put a plug in a plug socket?
Yeah, it feels uncomfortable. Like, Mr. Weasley clearly doesn't want to talk about work over dinner as well. Like, he's not interested. And you can tell she's already setting up the difference in their professional lives, because Percy starts criticizing Ludo Bagman, who is rubbish at his job, and we do realize he is rubbish later on. And Mr. Weasley's like, oh yes, Ludo, lovely chap. And then Percy's like, yeah, he's a nice guy, but he's shit at his job. Whereas Mr. Weasley hasn't even really realize that, because Mr. Weasley doesn't really care, I don't think, that someone's shit at their job, because I don't think he's amazing at his job, to be honest.
Do you think that Bagman guy is like a metaphor for, not a metaphor, but he represents maybe Mr. Weasley and that generation
I think
of
so.
of workers who maybe are a little bit like a little bit incompetent, don't take their job very seriously, get away with a lot of shit, and then you've got Percy coming in
And
really
also,
conscientious.
yeah, and also break the rules. So, we said before that Mr. Weasley, there's been a few times where he's bent the rules. Rules don't apply
Mm.
to him. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm in the ministry. And
Mm.
he says it here. He says something about Ludo Bagman, like, "Oh yes, I once got his cousin off one of the charges. I pulled some strings in the ministry and got him off." And I was like, yeah, again, Mr. Weasley using his power um, for favors, and that's again something Percy I don't think would do, because Percy is very, very rule driven, isn't he? Like, these are the rules, I don't
Yeah.
break them, this is unacceptable. So it's definitely, they're complete polar opposites, aren't they?
It kind of casts Mr. Weasley in a bit of a negative light, actually. Seeing him in this way, he does, he bewitched a car. His son, Harry, got away with that when they should have been expelled. You kind of see why Draco
Yeah,
gets a bit annoyed.
and we were
And
saying
then
this
his,
in chapter 3, because he uses the flu network at the Dursleys' house, and that's against the rules. He says that, oh, I'm not allowed to do this.
yeah. And at the same time, he's busting, what's he called? Malfoy's dad. He's busting Malfoy's dad's
Yeah,
chops, whatever the expression is, for, possessions of something, these possessions and all this stuff. And I'm just like, you little hypocrite, you are abusing your power.
yeah. And
So all
even,
Draco,
and the
all
fact that
my
he's
Draco.
he's got all those muggle objects that he's put charms on, and Ron was like, if my dad would have to arrest himself because he's broken so many rules.
Is that
um
what he said?
yeah, because he keeps bewitching, muggle items, and that's basically what he does as a job, is stopping people doing that.
That's awful. Oh my word. And now I just feel sorry for Percy because he's had to live in a family which didn't respect the very rules. This everyone else, they make everyone else abide. He must be really frustrated.
Maybe that's why he moves out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's also there's lots of firsts in this chapter, because it's also our first introduction to the gnomes, isn't it?
Oh, but I thought the garden gnomes were introduced in book 2.
Oh no,
When
sorry, no, you are right. You are right because the denoming. But she describes them as little muddy potatoes that are 10 inches. And I was like, that's not how I imagined them at all.
and why bring them up again, I wonder?
Hmm.
Because the function of them in the second book was a way of introducing the book that Professor Lockhart wrote about getting rid of garden gnomes.
Yeah,
So why do you think they're brought up again here?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just for comic effect again. Um,
Maybe.
there's this weird scene, and I was like, Bill and Charlie, you're acting like, I don't know, not cool. Where
Mm.
again, and I don't know the significance of this scene either, where Bill and Charlie have enchanted some tables and they're flying them in the air and smashing them into each other for fun. And Hermione's really nervous watching it, and Percy's disapproving, whereas everyone else
Mm.
thinks it's fun. And they're like smashing them together until one of them wins, and then they like set them down for dinner. And I'm just like, why are you doing this? I didn't
So
get it.
do these tables contain the cutlery and the food and everything that Molly has so
No.
carefully cooked for them? They're just empty tables, are
Mm,
they? Is it to indicate that troublemakers are in the family?
maybe. Um, I don't know. I didn't get this scene, and it just reminded me of like when teenagers, I don't know, the kind of things teenagers would do with magic if like they were in a car park drinking cider at 1 a.m. Not something I would expect two adult wizards to do in their family home. I was a bit like, I don't really get what's going on here.
It's weird, isn't it? I wonder what they were trying to show with that.
Mm,
That they're wild, that they're kind of like wild kids, or maybe that it's a sign that the Weasleys again parenting style is a little bit more free and a little bit more liberated than other parenting styles.
hmm. This is
It's weird.
we start to get hints now. So I think the whole purpose of Percy working for Crouch is because obviously we have the whole thing with Crouch later on and Bertie Crouch Jr. and all of that stuff. And that's why he needs to start mentioning Crouch now so that he can notice his behavior change. Um, but he also mentions that Bertha Jorkins is missing, and this is obviously a clue um, for later. And he keeps saying how frustrating it is because no one seems to care, no one's investigating it, and they just think that she's silly. But obviously, we know that she's being abducted, don't we?
So we know that Bertha Jenkins is in Albania. That's what everyone's been told. But didn't someone else go to Albania as well? Didn't Dumbledore say in book 1 that he thought Voldemort had gone to Albania? Did that ring a bell for you too?
Yeah, well, obviously, we know, don't we? Because we read the books that she's been taken by Voldemort. But
Yeah,
it's
but
annoying because I think Percy's point is no one's looking into it, no one cares. So again, there's this inefficiency in the ministry that Mr. Weasley's probably not bothered about. Ludo Bagman's not bothered about. There's old school that we were just talking about, whereas Percy, who's like fresh, brand new into the ministry, he's much more efficient.
yeah, but what I mean is, does J.K. Rowling let slip in this chapter that Bertha Jenkins is in Albania because she's sort of foreshadowing the fact that Voldemort did kill her? Because in book 1, Dumbledore says that Voldemort is in Albania. Do you know what I
Okay,
mean?
I didn't notice that. You're probably right there.
I just thought that was like a little hint as to kind of
Hmm.
where she was. So why is it that what's he called, Bagman?
For who now? Ludo
Ludo,
Bagman, yeah.
yeah, that's his name, isn't it? So why doesn't Ludo Bagman follow it up? Is he under some sort of curse to not follow it up?
I think he's just shit at his job and he's lazy. Because isn't he an
Okay.
ex-Quidditch player? And I thought he only got the job because he's like a famous Quidditch, an ex-Quidditch player. He's a
So
bit
this sort
inefficient.
of so this sort of confirms what Percy's saying, that he's shit at his job, because J.K. Rowling is mentioning the disappearance now of Bertha Jenkins and his lack of action. And in fact, even doesn't even Mr. Weasley say, "Oh, if it was someone in my department, I'd want to know where they are." Doesn't he say something like that as well? Like,
Oh,
doesn't he
does he?
concede that it's a bit
Okay.
odd? I thought so, or maybe that was
Mm.
Percy who says that.
Yeah. Cool. And then towards the end of this chapter, I think Ron, Harry, and Hermione are kind of talking about Sirius and are asking Harry if he's heard from him. And Harry's about to tell them that his scar's hurting, but he kind of holds back, which I think Harry does quite a lot, especially later on. I really feel for him because he's going through so much, but he doesn't tend to open up to people. It's almost like he doesn't want to burden them, does he?
No, sorry, I did a massive yawn, and I thought if I made it really obvious, you'd come in and say something, but it was just a
I
blank
just
blank
looked up
face.
to see the end of it, and I thought you were swallowing a fly or something.
um, quick question. Molly says that she's going to. She says something like, "Leave your list of things that you need for school downstairs. I'm going to go into town and I'm going to pick everything up for everyone." So I don't know if it would just be me being like a little bit awkward, but I'd be like, "Oh no, don't worry. Like you don't have to. No, I'll go. Like I'll get my own stuff." Or like, what's the plan? Is he going to leave
Yeah.
money with his list because she's poor? Like I just would not be knowing what to do right now. Like, would I give her money? Is
Yeah.
she going to pay for his stuff? Is he okay with that? Really?
I'd feel really awkward, especially as like their financial situation's not that great. And I'd be like, so do I bank transfer you? Like, what's the
Yeah.
situation?
And is this comment her treating him like a son? Like that's it now? Is that like his? Is she his mama?
Mama. Yeah, I don't know. It is sweet how she treats him like a son. Um, yeah. So yeah, I feel like there's quite a lot, like a lot of new things in this. Obviously, meeting the new brothers, Bill and Charlie. There were some other new things in there. This kind of all this information about the ministry and Ludo Bagman and Bertha Jorkins and all this stuff. So it's almost like laying the foundation for us
Yeah,
understanding who these people are, Barty Crouch and everyone. So
and getting little clues as well, aren't we? Like because we've never heard of Barty Couch before, I don't think.
mm, cool.
Um, but also my respect for Mr. Weasley, although it wasn't great, wasn't massively high before this chapter, I think it has gone down a little bit, you know.
Yeah, it went down, didn't it? It started going down in chapter 4 and 3 when they visit the Dursleys, and we weren't too impressed. Yeah,
No.
not great.
So, you know, are we being a bit harsh? You know, let us know. If you think we're being a little bit harsh, we want to know so we can improve ourselves. You know, are we being a little bit unfair? Is Molly the boss? Would you choose Bob or Charlie? Is it Bob, Chris, or Charlie?
Bill,
Those are the names, isn't it?
you
Bill.
don't deserve Bill if
Bill.
you can't even remember his name, to be honest.
You're right. You should have him. I'll have
Thank
Charlie.
you.
And do you think the twins are dangerous? Do you think that, you know, they're causing problems and that they need to be stopped? Do you think it was fair for Molly to ban their orders? That just seems so over the top to me. But yeah.
Are they out of
Any other questions?
control?
Are they out of control? Hmm.
Yeah,
Uh, I think that concludes our episode for today.
cool. Thank you for listening. Come and say hi on Facebook and let us know if you disagree or agree with anything we've said. Cool.
Lovely. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.